I'm on the move, I'm going up. I'm a man on a mission with no mission, and I'm looking for love. Oh, I'm just looking for love. It's gotta be against the law to look this damn good. Watch out now. The baby, I feel real good, and I wish I would. Watch out.
So welcome to episode 81 of Agencyphonics. I am joined today by Julian Roberts, who I had the pleasure of being on his podcast a few months back now, where we spoke about all things leadership. And in particular, I was talking about the flat organizational structures. But I was really, really keen to get Julian back on our show to understand more from him about leadership, because it's one of those topics that I think affects every single agency founder and owner on a day-to-day basis. But before we start, I just want to say a couple of thank yous. As always, Agencyphonics is a not-for-profit social enterprise. It's funded by our sponsors, and we're very grateful and very lucky to have sponsors from Sante Group. Sante Group provides health and well-being cover, lifestyle benefit choices. Basically, they provide those programs that give your team members access to private medical health care, confidential phone lines and support, and we can't rate them highly enough. Paul Nugent, David Booth are both in the community. So if you go to the community, you're in there, track down those guys and talk to them. They are really, really good guys. And then secondly, Hayes McIntyre, who are our most recent sponsor. And Hayes McIntyre are a fantastic accountancy firm who we have had the pleasure of working with on a number of occasions with different to solve different accountancy challenges, and also to just to support our clients generally with their money. And they provide a full range of audit, tax, outsourcing, transactional value, transactional advisory. Basically anything to do with kind of media and agencies is one of their specialty areas that they work in. So again, you can check out the guys. Luke Clark is in the community, so you can check him out if you'd like to. And then lastly, this is like the worst plug of all, really, because it's actually Cactus, our company that sponsors the community as well. And I think we've actually invested, I think, of something like £150,000 every year now for the past 4 years into the community to keep it going as our kind of way to pay it forward, is the best way to describe it. So you find the Cactus team are in the community. They're there to help and support. No one's selling to anybody. They're just there to help and support you. And one day, when you've scaled your business up and you might need a bit of help, you know where we are if we can help you on a different level. So there's all my shameless plugs and my introduction for today. So Julian, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Spencer. After all that introduction, really pleased to see you and meet you again.
Yeah, and I'm sorry it's taken so long to get you here, but we are here finally at last. It's going to be certainly my last podcast episode ever.
Oh,
So
well, I feel honoured. I feel very honoured to be the last one.
So we better make this really good.
Expectations are rising already now. Okay?
Yeah, so I've been doing this podcast for a couple of years now, and our business has grown so much now that unfortunately I have to go back to running the day-to-day, and so I'm going to be stepping down. My team have been doing a wonderful job of taking over, picking up the podcast, and actually making, I think, all the subject matters more diverse and more interesting, which has been fantastic. So let's make this a good one, Julian. And my topic, the topic for me of leadership is one that's so close to my heart, and on many levels. Like, first of all, having built an agency business up and been been a leader of up to 200, in fact, part of a leadership team of 600, and then coming all the way back down again to doing a similar role to you, coaching people, and then more recently scaling back up again. I've realized that I think you get amnesia a little bit to how tough really it is being a leader until you're back in those shoes again. But tell me, how did your career start? What took you into this place of being a leadership coach?
Yeah, I spent 20 years working in the sort of food industry, predominantly as a sales leader. So I was leading sales teams, working for companies like Heinz, Yoplait, and sort of dealing with sort of retailers like Asda, Tesco, Walmart, as the like. And and I loved it and I enjoyed it. And part of that was not only managing, leading sort of teams, it was building strategies, it was creating routes to market, it was working with the marketing team to sort of create fantastic products. And it was a real joy, and I loved it. Got very excited by it. And then I think it was probably now 7 years ago, I was unfortunately in a toxic workplace, which I remember people talking about toxic workplace. And I thought, oh, what's the big deal about all that? And then suddenly I was in one, and it was horrific, and it just took the life out of me. And I felt undermined. I lost a lot of confidence. Everything just got wiped away. And interestingly, at the same time, my wife and I were looking to foster a child as well at the same time. And so those two things collided quite nicely, really, because then I'm thinking, okay, to foster, I wanted to support my wife in that process and be more around, more sort of independent, I guess. And then the fact that I was in this toxic work environment. So I decided, okay, what do I do? So I jumped ship initially to do some consultancy, because that's what people do when they leave the corporate world. They do consultancy. And I loved that and enjoyed that. But I thought, I want to do something. What else can I do with this rather than just helping companies build strategies, which I still do? Is I look back on my career, and as much as I loved the strategy and growing sales and hitting the profit targets and everything else, it was the people side of things that I loved. And I loved having that ability to unlock people's talents. And I had the ability to unlock people's talent as well. I could spot talents. And I had a real sort of coaching style. And I thought, oh, that's a coach, isn't it? And so I then retrained as an executive coach. And since then, that's what I do. I sort of work with organizations, work with individuals, private clients in a coaching capacity. But I also obviously do the consultancy piece as well, helping SMEs grow their businesses as well. So that's how I got into it. And I've been doing it just over 6.5 years now.
Wow. So when you were as a sales leader, when it was working really well, and was that because you feel like the values and the culture of the team were very aligned? I mean, obviously you'd recruited people into your teams in many of those organizations. It's like, what was the difference, do you think, between the toxic environment that you ended up in and the environments before where you clearly enjoyed what you were doing?
Yeah, I think with the toxic environment, it was people with certainly their own agendas, and I would say where there's a lot of insecurity in leadership, it breeds toxicity as well. Because when you're insecure as a leader, you then sort of sandbank and defend your empire, your team, your area, and look for ways to disrupt other people to make them feel insecure. And I think that was the difference. I was one of the organizations I worked for was Yoplait, which was incredibly entrepreneurial, quite a big business, but very entrepreneurial. There's a lot of security in terms of the leadership, great relationships with the senior team, a lot of openness, a lot of transparency, and I would say psychological safety, where people could challenge, people could sort of try new things and have a go, and even if it failed, let's see what we learned from that. So that was the difference for me. And I think toxic environments are driven predominantly by insecure leaders that sort of then breed that sort of behaviors of trying to protect, and unfortunately get a lot of damage in their path.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I noticed certainly was when we, as a business in our agency back in the day, when we sort of shifted the mindset to it's okay to make a mistake. That was a real big transformative change for us, because it took away, like it showed that we trusted people. It showed that we almost, in one hand, if you made a mistake, it was okay, but as long as you took responsibility for it, so look, I made a mistake. This is the lesson I've learned from it. It worked, and we used to always also, though, having said that, there was an element of collaboration in that, but an element of directiveness, which was, but we're better than making mistakes twice or three times, and so we kind of had that caveat, was you can't just go around making loads of mistakes everywhere. But I like that psychological safety point, because I think if people are trusted and empowered as adults, they should be able to go on and and just be able to act without a fear of reprisal.
Well, that's the difference, isn't it? It's the adult piece, isn't it? I think with the toxic environment, we were treated as children. The board, really? were the adults, and then you had the children. And it's that relationship just was not right. Not treating people like adults and allowing people to be adults, but allowing also people to, as you say, make mistakes. But there's a learning loop with mistakes and failure, but it's allowing that to happen, and not sort of chastising people, not sort of making people
Yeah.
mockery of, oh, you've messed up here. Well, okay, but at least I'm trying. I'm pushing the boundaries. I'm trying to do something
Yeah.
different here.
Also, not only I think you mentioned about insecure leadership, but sometimes I find that also in organisations I've worked in on a board level. I think I might have experienced this once or twice myself actually over the years, where an individual somehow breaks through the recruitment, the values checking, the behaviours checking, and you get a toxic individual who becomes this kind of like disruptor within the organisation and starts to turn everything, and sometimes a lack of decision to identify those people and deal with those people quickly enough can also be
Mm.
quite detrimental, can't it?
Oh, totally. And I think, that's when it has an impact on the wider team. When there's somebody who is toxic and it's not been dealt with and not been sorted, you lose respect as a leader if you're not dealing with it. And it disengages a lot of the rest of the team, apart from the impact the person's having as well. Where I wasn't that toxic, unfortunately, this was in the board level. There was these individuals, so it's slightly more difficult to try and
Yeah,
change and challenge. And when you do challenge, you do get a bit of a pushback on that. And so, no, it can be quite difficult. But I think certainly, and this is where I think, perhaps where your role, when you do lots of NED work, comes in, where you can help challenge, certainly in the context of a board, if there's sort of individuals there that are bordering on the line of being narcissistic or toxic in that sort of way. And I think that's where, I think companies always need some external input or
yeah,
accountability, really, to keep them on track.
yeah. I think one of the things that I think is also quite difficult today, and I don't know, this isn't really a change from this has always been the case, but I think understanding people's personalities, and also I think we're much more aware now of the different personality types. Like I think obviously there was always I remember getting a job once, Julian. I did a Myers-Briggs test, and when I started the job, everybody seemed just like me. It was like this weird, uncanny. They'd recruited the same Myers-Briggs profile for a certain role, and all my colleagues seemed the same. But there is a spectrum, and all of us to a certain degree sit on it. And on one hand, there's more awareness of dyslexia, ADHD, OCD. On the other side, you've got things like autism, and you've got and then often sometimes the more introverted side, the extroverts tend to be sort of more the ADHD side. Well, that's not true, because sometimes it's the other way around. But actually, sometimes it's what I've learned of late as well, especially, is that and I work in a team with a high proportion of introverts. It's been quite an interesting thing for me, is that actually, just because people act differently, it doesn't mean the same thing. It's like everyone kind of acts in a way that's close to their personality types, of to a combination probably of their genetics, their psychology, and their biology. I feels to me sometimes like it's quite complicated trying to understand why people act the way they do, because it's not always the same for the same reasons, is it? Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
Oh, no, totally. I think, we know that humans are complex, and I think the fact that we've got more learning, we've got more books out there, we've got social media, people sharing, people are far more aware of whether they're ADHD or autistic, or all those sort of factors are more out there. But also, I think leadership has got a lot more transparent in how you should lead. You at one time, it's just for the only chosen few who did an MBA or who read those sort of special books. But now everybody has access to whatever, it might be Simon Sinek, whoever you want to watch, follow, or
Yeah,
Jordan Peterson. And so you're picking up all this, and therefore you're hearing, Jordan Peterson talk about how to interact with people, how to deal with people. And then you're observing your leader. Are they doing that way? So there's a lot more
yeah,
going on. And I think as a leader, it is complex, and it can be quite overwhelming, really. And I think, for me, it's not about getting overwhelmed. It's obviously be informed and be aware of things, but actually you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be the experts. It boils down to being that genuine who you are. Find out who you are first. I think that's where a lot of leaders perhaps fail because they try to understand everybody else. But actually, do you know what? Know yourself first. Know what excites you, what motivates you. Why do you like going to those dinner drinks, or why don't you like going to those dinner drinks? Why don't you like presenting? Whatever it may be, understand that thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place to start, is getting understand that self-awareness, and then start to
Yeah.
use that to understand other people and navigate through that.
Yeah. So we're jumping a little bit ahead on what I was planning to talk about today, right? Because I want to kind of just first of all say that you set up a podcast which I came on. So and what's the podcast called? Just so everyone's listening can
It's called Helping Organizations Thrive.
okay, helping organizations thrive. So and you set this up, and on that podcast you've interviewed many leaders, and do you always talk about the conversation around leadership and management? Is that typically?
It's leadership and resilience. So I could talk to
Okay.
a FTSE 100 CEO through to a guy who's recently done 105 full Ironman triathlons in 105 days,
Okay.
through to
Wow.
Olympians. So I have Olympians, Paralympians, world
Yeah.
record holders. So it's quite expansive, but the premise of it is all about leadership and resilience. Yeah.
Okay. And so you've got the podcast, and what is it that would you say that from all of the episodes of interviewing people, are there any kind of standout lessons or philosophies that you've kind of adopted? Is there anything or maybe something changed your perspective on something that you used to believe one way that you now, because of the podcast, has made you change the way you think about things?
Yeah, I mean, it's been. I mean, I'm coming up. I've just done over 200 episodes now, and so
Wow.
yeah, it's been an amazing conversation. I had a great conversation with you as well, and I do see it as a learning opportunity every time I speak to somebody. There's two things that, for me, one that confirmed what I already know, and one that made me think actually this is really important as well. And I think it's the first one is having a purpose-driven organization, and that sounds very cliche, and it's talked about be purpose-driven. But I've had lots of conversations with leaders, with Olympians, all sorts of things. That purpose has become the core thing. Within in a context of a team or an organization, is invaluable, and that has become really prominent for me. And I noticed this sort of back in COVID time. We had obviously the lockdowns, and everybody didn't know what they're doing. It's absolutely chaos, and bizarrely, there was no playbook how to manage a sort of a pandemic. And I remember talking to leaders at the time who were fairly stressed out and in that survival mode, and I was trying to help them into a more sort of thriving mindset. And I remember one particular leader who had a purpose-driven organization, and I said to him, I said, "Has your purpose of your organization, has it changed in the context of this lockdowns and pandemic?" He went, Not really." I said, "Well, only the how you go about it and your timing has probably changed. That's the two differences that have changed." And I said to him, "Go back to your team, get on your Zoom call, get that purpose statement back up again, and use it as a source of inspiration, why you wrote it, what it means, and get everybody in your team to sort of mull over it, facilitate that. But then to use it as a way of, like your North Star, because that's what it is really, and to help guide you into what to do next." And so he went away, did that, came back to me, and he said it was a brilliant session. Everybody got more inspired. They got a little bit lost out of the reality of what was going on, and got a bit more into the future in terms of stepping back, and lifted their gaze a little bit. But what he noticed, what started to come out of it, because they stood back and started to think a little more clearly, they started to come up with ways of working that were different, how to interact with their clients, how to interact internally. And suddenly it created a way that really helped navigate the way forward for them. So the reason I say that is just because they were purpose driven, and purpose is fundamental in creating meaning. I know it comes really cliche and really like, oh, about purpose, but it really does work. And it creates engagement. It creates a sense. Not everybody's purpose will align to your purpose of your business, but if there's a sort of broad alignment, people will get excited or feel a sense of meaning, and feel that actually your business is not just about sales, profit. Actually, it's something bigger and more sort of more community based, or more contributing to the world in a bigger place. And I think that's, to me, has stood out in terms of all the interviews I had. And that goes to an individual as well. When you are struggling individually, and you step back and go, what is my purpose? That helps you redefine help you navigate those difficulties and those challenges as well. So that's, for me, really helpful to sort of
Yeah.
think about being purpose driven. And
It's
also,
oh, go on.
just one thing. There
Yeah.
was a study done. I can't remember the name of the book now, but they tracked a number of businesses over 10 years. Some that were purpose driven and some were just sort of focused on sales and profits. And the ones that were purpose driven outperformed throughout the markets anywhere between 5 and 13% better than the purely focused on sales and profit.
It's funny. It's quite topical because I had a bit of a friendly heated debate with a good friend of mine on Saturday night, and who's a very successful business owner on multiple occasions, and he felt purpose was overrated, and I think that sometimes the word purpose itself doesn't always necessarily kind of explain the underpinning of what that actually means. And I think I love a couple of things you just said then, by the way, which I'll pick up on as well. I know that when I lost 3 jobs in 1 year before I started my business, and I lost 2 jobs, and I went through 3, and it was clear things weren't working out for me. And I read a book called "What Color's Your Parachute," and basically it was in the book it had the Ikigai diagram converted west and wide, and and I asked myself the 4 questions, which I think that really, for those people who, like my friends, who basically find the word purpose a bit too much, like everything's purpose, everything's Simon Sinek why and everything else, but is actually, at the heart of it, what is it you're good at? What do you love? What could you get paid for, and what does the world need? And ultimately, I love what you just said. You just said then about, what is the part that almost, you're playing in your role or in your company towards, like, you don't have to be changing the world by yourself, right? You can be part of a small movement of 100 companies that are all working in that area to make, marketing more sustainable or whatever it may well be. But I do think when you distill it down, if you are able to in all of our jobs, all of our lives, be able to answer those 4 questions, then you kind of inadvertently have got purpose, right? Because if you can answer those 4 questions, and ultimately that's what purpose is. And then of course, from an organizational perspective, I think it's really important that, and we had to do this ourselves. And we're far from perfect. I've realized it's just as much like we're teaching agencies, being a non-exec and consulting. And so when you do it yourself, sometimes you get a wake up call, or actually how your rose tinted glasses, or when you used to do it, was so much easier. But also it was just, sometimes you're right, what you said, sometimes you have to stop and just, step off the world for a day and just look at actually what the great work you do. Like, we realized that when we just stopped our business, every single day we're literally helping hundreds of agency owners on their journeys. And through the work that we've done, we've helped many businesses grow and survive in a space that maybe they wouldn't have had the resources and resources to do so. And I think sometimes it's good to just stop and reflect and see the impact that you're having and the work you're doing, rather than just jumping from client to client or problem to problem, right? So I love what you said then. I think that's such an important thing to do. And even in our own team meeting, which was only a couple of weeks ago, Julian, we actually said just a quick reminder of why we do what we do, why we exist, which I think is always and why we exist is a nice kind of way to describe really the purpose or the cause, or the road, the path that you're going down. And it was just really nice to stop and reflect on that. So I think it's a really good reminder. So that's really lovely to hear. And when people call you up though, so when you have clients today, what's the number one problem that people will call you up with and say, Julian, I need to talk to you. I've got a problem with, what's the main problem would you say that you solve day to day?
Well, there's a number of things.
Has it changed also, by the way? Has it changed over the last year, or is it still fundamentally the same?
It's fundamentally, people feel stuck, and that could be that covers a catch-all of many things. That could be from an executive who's in his late 40s thinking, I just feel stuck. I don't feel very motivated. I need something new. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to do it. It could be that. It could be a business owner who feels stuck and he wants to, he knows he wants to grow his business, because everybody wants to grow their business.
Yeah.
but he doesn't know how to go about it.
Yeah.
And often that is where I come in and provide real clarity of vision and mission and everything else. Because often I find a lot of certainly solopreneurs who've then grown their business and into a sort of big business started with that purpose and that mission and clarity, and then that sort of got diluted as they've gone along, and they've
Yeah.
not then sort of continued to communicate that to the rest of the team, and then they just lost their way a little bit. Because I think what purpose does also is when the old shiny new object comes in its way and new project, you think, does this align to what we're going? And if it does, the happy days go on it. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. So yeah, they're the ones that people come to me with, really. And so working with people to, I was with a client last week who were a board who were feeling a little bit, I would say, down in the dumps, a little bit lost, not entirely sure where they were going, why they
Yeah.
were doing what they were doing. And we spent a day sort of re-clarifying their vision and mission. And sounds really basic stuff, but you know what? They suddenly got very energized. They were suddenly feeling very excited about the future. And suddenly went, oh, we've got such a thing to talk about to our staff, to our team, and to attract other people. We can use this. And suddenly they found a way of navigating all the difficulties that they were facing. So yeah, those sort of things I will work with.
Amazing. And so when you would you say this year has been different at all? I mean, I think it's been a challenging year for many people this year. Have you noticed any changes in the way things have been?
Yeah, I think people have been. I mean, I know COVID came and we all sort of pivoted and all that sort of stuff and
Yeah.
adapted. But I think this year, with all the other external stuff that's been going on, from Ukraine wars, cost of living crisis,
Yeah.
energy, all that, and then the impacts on the economy. I think this year, weirdly, and just what I picked up on my own sort of experience, feels probably the most uncertain time of my life in terms of how business is at the moment. There's so much uncertainty, so much. I'm just not sure what's happening, where we're going, how we're getting. So I'm feeling a lot more from businesses now. They're just not entirely sure how to navigate the next 4 or 5 years. Uh, Even I think during COVID, it felt. I don't know if it was because everybody was in the same boat type of thing. Felt not in the same boat, in the same sea, in their own boat, and they felt this sense of camaraderie. And now it's slightly different. We're slightly separated and doing our own thing. But I think uncertainty and the ability to adapt and overcome things and challenges seem to become thick and fast all the time. And, one minute they were, doing a process and a way of attracting clients, and that's just not working now for whatever reason. And I think, technology and AI and all that, the change piece has just got faster and faster. And I think trying to keep up. So I think business owners feel probably quite overwhelmed with how to navigate this right at the moment and feel a little bit like, oh my goodness,
Yeah, I think like
what do we do?
business is difficult in most years, isn't it? And then
Yeah.
you kind of throw in, two wars. Let's call them wars, but two, well, definitely one's a war, and the other one is leading to a war. It seems, but we have the hyperinflation. Unprecedented levels, interest rates being high and then obviously the inflation impact of just, cost of living. This year, there's been, as I said, it's hard enough in business normally without adding all of those things in to the landscape and having to, to navigate through it. So I think I wrote a post a couple of days ago saying what an exhausting year it's been for most
Mm.
entrepreneurial founders I've met. And most leaders, I would say, have found it exhausting. But I guess ultimately, I sometimes I guess there's an element of resilience building. Sometimes when you have those tough years and it goes back to the easier years, you're a bit stronger for them. So I don't know. Maybe ironically, there is. I mean, you talked about resilience before. How do you stay resilient when these times are like they are, slightly tougher and have more demands on us?
Yeah, it is pretty tough. And, you know, and, you know, purpose is really important. And
Yeah.
I'm not laboring this, but I think it's important that does
You
help
get up
people.
and you love what you do every day. I know that everyone attacks that sort of thing, but if you do love what you do and you enjoy it, it's half the battle,
Well, of
right?
course it is, and
Yeah.
just and having that to help navigate your business does really help. But
Yeah.
I work with a lot of businesses, and I help them, and I do a lot of stuff, sort of almost like building resilient processes,
Okay.
because it's not just about the sort of woo woo stuff of resilience. I do lots of ice cold baths and go in the cold sea and all that sort of stuff, and that's more
Me
woo woo
too.
to
I've
that.
got a nice bath out there as well, but
Yeah.
the last week I've been slightly nervous about getting in.
Well, mine got down to, I think, 2 degrees this week,
Oh
last week.
wow, I'm down to about I think it was 7 was the lowest, but I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, I've had -1 back in
wow.
January this year. That was pretty. Yeah, but
So
yeah,
on a separate conversation, because it's live, everyone wants to hear this. Like, do your hands not and feet not really hurt when it's that cold? Because
I try not to put my hands in now because I just can't.
okay,
I
that's
can't.
something.
It just burns away. My feet. I've got friends who put like boots on, but
I
no,
mean,
I
everyone
just.
listening might think that that's like, isn't that defeating the object? But there is this thing when you get in ice cold water, it's great to be able to put your body in and to breathe, and it does. I mean, I personally I enjoy having. The weird thing is, I'm not a cold shower person, but once you've been in an ice bath, you can get in a cold shower and it feels hot. It's really bizarre. But the pain you get in your feet and hands is actually quite a lot when the temperature gets low. So I did hear that people put boots on and stuff, so I might have to join that club.
Yeah, I don't. I'm at the moment that they're okay. And when I go in the sea, I wear gloves because obviously you want to get.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's fine. That's the sea's about 6-7 degrees at the moment, which is pretty cold actually.
Yeah. Wow.
But I mean, to me, that's one of my resilience ways of building
Yeah.
resilience for me and everything else. But yeah, so but that's really helpful. But
Well,
in
that's good
terms
to
of,
know that it will help me with my resilience, because I'm asking this question because I want to work on building my resilience at the moment, because I have to absorb often a lot of the negative stresses from clients, things out there. So at least that's one tick box I can do. What else? What are your other tips?
what other tips? You probably do gratitude or journaling. Do you do that sort of stuff?
Yeah, do you know what? I did used to do it a lot more. It's one of those things you get in and out of the habit of doing. But I think being grateful every morning for sometimes the things that aren't so good as well as the things that are good, I found was useful. But yeah, that's a really good one.
Well,
And
the good thing about gratitude, there's some studies that have said that your dopamine and serotonin levels go up when you're
okay,
grateful, and those two neurotransmitters make you feel good, and it's similar
amazing.
to cold water. And so, if you start feeling good, then you start seeing things a bit more positive, and it sort of lightens the load, and you're less in your what you call your amygdala top part of your brain, or the sort of stress, sort of fight or flight
Yeah,
as well. So yeah, gratitude journaling is really good because you can look back and think where you've come, what you've done, and you can learn
yeah.
from that. It's a good way of learning because resilience is about learning as well as just
And
sort
I
of
found
getting through something.
with gratitude this as well. This was a really good thing to do. And I have done it for a while. And I've got to say, I think with the new year coming up and the Christmas coming up, it's going to be a perfect time for me, I think, to restart. And probably many people listening, because sometimes you need that reset. But also, I think when I used to get challenges, things that used to stress me, I used to be grateful for them. It sounds weird, but sometimes you're grateful for the things that test you. And there may be a way to rationalize that with the gratitude, but also being grateful for the successful outcomes that you want to have. So rather than just saying, "Oh,
Mm.
I'm really grateful for my house, my home, my health," saying sometimes things like, "I'm really grateful for us hitting all our sales targets each month." I mean, it sounds weird, but in a way, it sort of like starts to almost shift it to fit to without being woo woo again, but more sort of manifesting a future of trying to put yourself in the right frame of mind for things positive.
Yeah, and I think being, I talk a lot with companies about taking challenges and almost rather than seeing them as a challenge and go, how do we fix this? How do we fix this?
Yeah,
You flip it basically, flip the script on it all. Again, very cliche. I apologize. But actually, and you ask the question, what opportunities does this give me? Because of
yeah,
this challenge, what opportunities does it give me? And it
nice.
just changes your mindset, and you go from a
Yeah, I love
narrow to like a open up, and you go, okay, so I've got no clients or lost a client, whatever it may be. What does opportunities to give me? Opportunity to
yeah,
refocus, do this,
to
do this, and
replace them
this.
with a higher paying client.
Exactly. And so suddenly you start to create ideas, and it just, and also you're flipping into more of your logic brain, your prefrontal cortex, where you think clearly, and I think that's a
Yeah,
way of flipping it. So, and you can do that yourself personally as well. When you get a challenge, you can be grateful for the challenge because I'm going to learn from this, because that's obviously a good thing. But also, what opportunities does this give me to overcome and change and develop, etc., etc.
So the other thing about resilience, and this is, I listened to something the other day, and I think I heard this many years ago. And again, I think a lot of the things we're talking about are sometimes things that people, we do, and then we kind of forget to do them, and then we get out of the routine of doing them, or we lose the habit of doing them. But meditation is another one where I remember once being on an aeroplane, Julian, where I heard someone talking behind me on the seat, and I think he was talking to his boss, the person, and he was saying to her, how do you, I don't know how you work the way you do. And she said, well, it would be impossible if I didn't meditate 3 times a day. And I remember hearing that, thinking, wow. And like, clearly this person was senior, works long hours. And I heard something the other day, someone shared this with me after I was saying, I just felt like I didn't have the energy levels that I used to have. And, sometimes I blame that on getting older, which probably is the case. But actually, someone in this audiobook I heard, so it talks about you start every day with like 100% energy, or maybe that resilience is there, the same thing as 100%. And then through the day, things happen. Someone might annoy you and let you down, or someone might do something to say something horrible to you, or maybe a client's giving you a difficult challenge, and maybe you've got a problem at home with family, and normally, sort of, if you're lucky, you might be able to get all the way through to bedtime without, using 100% of your energy. But there are times for all of us when that 100% energy at the start of the day, by 11 o'clock, is at zero, right? And it's like you are beaten up, you're bruised, you're struggling, you're up against it. Is meditation part of a resilience building strategy?
Yeah, I broaden it out to mindfulness, which is what meditation is, and there's ways of doing that. I mean, when I go in my cold water, there's a mindful moment, because, as you know, when you're in cold water, you can't think about a lot, to be honest.
No, I'm getting out quickly. Where's that dry robe?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's looking for mindful practices, and then there's obviously the apps of meditation, there's yoga, and the reason it's powerful, because often in life we live in sort of almost 3 sort of modes of life. We either live in the past, where we think we should have done that, and we regret. And that's when you're in that position, you're basically depressed because you can't do anything about it, in essence. Or more often than not, and where a lot of people live right now, is in the future. And when you're in the future, your body, your system gets anxious because it can't control it. It doesn't know what's going to happen. There's lots of unknowns. And so anxiety goes up. And now this doesn't mean you don't plan. I'm not saying you don't plan and have strategic plans. But if you're constant in the future, then you'll have lots of anxiety. What mindfulness does, which is really powerful, again, lots of studies on this, it gets you in the moment. And we talk about being present and everything else. And when you're present, your system, your body is at peace, because it knows it's in control of absolutely everything at that point in time. Just like we're having a conversation now, we're in the present, we're fully in control. And mindfulness, yoga, meditation, what that does, it connects more to your prefrontal cortex as opposed to your amygdala midbrain, and therefore makes you more logic, more sound, and more greater thinking. So actually you become more effective as a leader. So if you take 2 or 3 times a day to be mindful, and it doesn't take much, it can take some breathing, it can be some app you can use, it can be like 5 minutes, you'll get back in the moment. And it will reduce your stress as well, because you won't be sort of about anxious at the future. You become more resourceful, more impactful, more productive as well. So there's loads of things. And that's why perhaps that exec was more effective, because they were getting more in the moment through to the meditation. So that's another great tool, whatever, to become more resilient as an individual, definitely.
And it's interesting you say that. And I'll share with everyone that I've actually just asked my assistant to put in 3 times a day, 15-minute gaps now, just for me to have like a factory reset time. Because if I don't have that, then it's very easy to be exhausted, at certain points, and not perform at my best. So I'm actually testing that moving forwards at the moment. And I think that it's something that I think more and more of us, in a world of always on, always switched on, it's becoming clear to me that, it doesn't matter who you are, the demands of that always on, switched on world is just, it takes its toll, and we all need to be able to pace ourselves. And the thing about the future thing's interesting because I think there's no, what do they say? Depression is a fear from the fear of the past, and anxiety is a fear of from the future. It's like, I think as a business leader, we have to often look to the future. We have to come up with plans and look forwards. And so we do find ourselves having to look forwards. And then sometimes that can cause anxiety because there's a challenge there. And I think it is very important that, yeah, everyone, as you rightly say, everyone is able to bring it back to the moment. And sometimes, I guess, just look at the next step on the journey that you've got to do to get to that end result. But it's maybe sometimes that end result can seem too large and overwhelming. And maybe the expectation on us is too great as well. So that's really, really fascinating. I love that you're a fellow ice bather as well. I'm not quite sure that I've gone to the sea stage yet, although I am working on that in the next couple of years. So be located near water. So then I'll be ringing you up for tips on how to do that.
Well, yes, yeah. Come down to the south coast. We can go and have a chat in the sea, so to speak.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, but I also go. I think with the sea, which is obviously nature, but I get into nature. I find when I'm getting really slightly overwhelmed and I've got a lot going on and my head's all a bit full, I'll go for a walk or a run in a forest local to me. Apart from the fact that my phone doesn't work there neither, which is great. So no connectivity.
Yeah.
And that's another reset for me. And again, exercise is good. So there's other ways of doing it. And the reflecting piece, a lot of people blow up because they've just not processed their day or their life. And the brain just goes, sorry, mate, we need to just shut you down for a moment to sort of process it all. And that's what happens. And so I think it's to reflect and process life is really important to get those learnings and just think and just be in nature. I mean, it's the best place to be is nature. I love it.
Yeah, so I think there used to be an app a few years ago, Julian, called Mappiness, and it was trying to map out where humans were at their happiest, and it was I think it was pretty much a British app. Anyway, so every time you kind of went out, every now and then it would ask you to literally, you had to score it there, take a photo of where you were, and then you had to score how happy you were on a scale of 1 to 10. And after using this app for about 3 months, and I think the data was being shared, with someone somewhere scientifically, for analyzing. But what I noticed was my own patterns was that every time I was walking in nature, I was a 10. It was like really, like, suddenly just stood out to me that was almost like my happy place. And I do think that whenever you look at over the years, what is it that makes humans happy? And, of course, having a purpose in there is got to be one of those things, but a sense of contribution, being connected to nature, maybe having a belief system, whatever that may well be, spiritual, non-spiritual, it's like having some kind of philosophy or belief system, and I think, there's a combination of things there that probably in the old days, we might have had a to-do list, Julian. We might have written down a to-do list. Maybe we'd had a to-don't list as well. But today it's really hard, I find, to do those things. You've almost got to just put it straight in the diary, because if it doesn't get in the diary, there's not really any time for it, is there? So I think all of us could probably benefit from doing more walk and talks, with and without the phone in your hand.
Well, I do some of my coaching in nature. I take some of my clients on a walk.
Do you? Amazing.
I've done some sort of vision sort of sessions with clients. We've gone for a walk. We've got some tea and some cake with us. We've gone for a few hours, and I will facilitate a sort of a session with them. And it takes the pressure, the intensity out of it, but also the inspiration is far better. And also, again, more studies, people hugging a tree, which is, I know sounds very sort of woo-woo, but actually,
no, I'm a tree hugger. That's fine.
If you hug a tree, or if you're near trees, your cortisol levels comes down. Again, science behind it, and cortisol obviously is your stress hormone. And so if you get into nature,
cortisol, so that's good.
So if you go into a wooded sort of environment, your cortisol levels would just naturally come down. So it's a good way to relieve stress. But yeah, definitely great.
Yeah, amazing. That's really, really good. I mean, we did at Agencyphonics, we did some walk and talks, and quite early on, really, before maybe we saw other people doing that. There was a wonderful piece of mindfulness as well in London. We did called Street. I think it's still going, Street Walk, where you went out and in a group and it was like a mindfulness session where you walked around London and you just observed things, graffiti and people, and it was good. But I took up boxing a couple of years ago, Julian, and I find martial arts are really good for mindfulness because you get into almost a flow state because you're you're afraid of getting hit. You kind of like, you have to kind of use your, unconscious memory to remember all of the moves and react in an unconscious way. And actually, I find that, I guess all sport probably applies to this, snowboarding and other things as well, but it's skiing. It's like trying to find things as well that I think can give your limbic brain a bit of a rest, from having to constantly be emotional, overthinking everything all the time.
Definitely.
Amazing. So that's been really good. So just like a couple of sort of last questions to finish off on. First of all, like for you, sort of like next year, if in terms of like leadership, are there any kind of like sort of, if you was to give a couple of big takeaways, I guess, to people here to think about for next year in the way that they lead their teams, is there any sort of bits of advice you would give them, quite generic, I guess, something that would be your top takeaway?
Yeah, I think, give some real thought of how you're going to lead your team in a time of uncertainty. It's that's a fact of life. It's how it is, and how that might manifest within your organization and what you need to do. And I think leadership is not about you; it's about how you serve others. And I think if you flip it that way and become, how do I serve my people? Sounds very like a president, but serve your organization,
the people. Well, how do you support them, right, to be the best that they can be?
Yeah, and think about them, what their needs, and how you can sort of resource them up, how you can coach them, how you can mentor, how you can train them, whatever it may be. And I think look at ways of getting teams into a place where they do feel psychologically safe, where they can challenge you, they can go and try new things and don't worry about failure. They can be creative. They can do something, learn new things. Because if you're sort of tackling uncertainty and change in an organization, in a marketplace, you're going to have creative new ideas. You're going to have new ways of doing things. You're going to have to try things you've never tried before, and some of those things might not work first time. And so I think creating environments that breed that, and then another way to sort of manage that uncertainty is, which sounds really sort of quite negative, almost do that. I call it as almost sort of the fire drills or the iceberg drills in your business. The what if scenarios. Do some scenario planning, because and use your team, because people get quite excited by that, because I know it sounds quite negative. Or the what if might happen. If we lost our sales at 20%. It sounds negative, but what you do is then you create strategies. You mitigate strategies to do that. But what I found that the best thing about that, I've done loads of this with organizations, do this sort of scenario planning. And I love it, because you try and think of all the things that could go wrong.
I love that example just then. Like, say to your team, imagine if we lost 20% of our revenue, what would we do? And then it almost becomes a more, it's you're sort of empowering everyone to help collaborate and come up with the solution, rather than you having to go, shit, we lost 20% of sales. We need to do this, that, and the other. Everyone can take more shared ownership. That's really, really smart, Julian. I love that.
But the great thing about that, obviously, hopefully you don't lose 20% of your sales.
Yeah, of course.
But if something else happens that you didn't scenario plan, you've got a process, and you've got a team or an organization very quickly, feet of flight, get to it and go, okay, we know how to do this. We know how to mitigate these. We've come up with strategies before, or we can take that strategy we had for that and sort of adapt it for this. And suddenly you become a bit more on the move very quickly. A lot of momentum happens. So that for me is how I would say start to face the year ahead, is think about scenario planning, and be an organization that that genuinely does learn, but also does what I call debriefing. A lot of organizations don't do debriefing well enough. Even when they have success, they don't debrief. Even when they have failures, certainly they don't debrief. That's where you learn. The British, the American Army do a key thing about debriefing, making sure after each exercise they do, they go, what did we learn? What do we do differently next time? What do we need to put into practice? What's the standard operating procedure? All that sort of stuff. That's how you learn as a team, as an organization. I think it's really important to, stop, reflect, learn, and move forward, and incorporate those into your organization. So those are the sort of key things I would think about next year.
Yeah, that's some fantastic pearls there. Thank you for sharing those, and thank you so much for giving up time today. Julian, if people want to track you down and find you, how's the best way to do that?
You can track me down on LinkedIn. It's a good place. Or you can find me on my website, which is julianrobertsconsulting.com. Or do check out my podcast, Helping Organizations Thrive. You type that into Google, it will come up.
Amazing. So thank you so much, Julian. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed my very last episode ever, but not the last episode of Agencyphonics. We've got plenty more of those to come along. Agencyphonics even, sorry. And yeah, so for me, that is a wrap. Thank you, everyone.